Welcome back to The Owner Seat, the show where operators, founders, and franchise leaders learn how to build businesses that don't break under pressure. Today's guest is one of the sharpest minds sitting at the intersection of finance, engineering, and AI, a voice that every fitness and wellness owner needs to hear right now. Cat Newman is the co-founder of SpendPilot, the ambient finance layer designed to stop reactive finance chaos and give operators real-time visibility into spend, risk, and performance before it hits your P&L. She's held strategic finance and operational roles for companies, and you've heard of them, like Apple, Novo, and Butter Payments, and she's now building one of the most important finance products of the AI era. In this episode, we go deep on why founders and franchise owners are getting crushed by usage-based pricing leaks, what LLM operations actually cost, and why finance, not engineering, needs to own it. Tokenization, can't wait to chat about that, model selection and hidden costs nobody budgets for, why real-time spend visibility is now mandatory, not optional, and finally, how proactive finance will save owners from margin compression in 2026 and beyond. So we're going to jump right into it. Kat, welcome to the Owner Seat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We've got a packed agenda today to cover, but excited to dive in with you.
Me too. Well, I want to kick it off with just that moment, that inflection point. You said, I have to build SpendPilot now. Walk us through that journey.
Yeah, totally. So for me, I think I've always been told build where you know and build what you know. And throughout my career, I've really seen kind of two things happen at once that made this trigger point for we have to build SpendPilot right now. The first was kind of, like I said, that recurring pattern that kept popping up in my roles, whether it was Apple or Butter or Novo, or even some of the advisory services I do for some pre-revenue and seed. There is this maniacal obsession with unit economics, and rightfully so, right?
Yeah.
That is what is really going to make or break your business, see if it can scale or if it's just this flash in the pan. So being the first hire in the businesses on the revenue side, whether it's pre-revenue or Series A, both on the B2B and B2C, I've seen that this is a primary focus and almost like a gator for people who are going to scale or who are going to make it. And what better way to really kind of mirror what we want to build towards than kind of mirroring machines like Apple. So I think for me, I wanted to really juxtapose what differentiates these early stage companies from these later stage behemoths like Apple. And what I really noticed was the key difference comes from the attention to detail and the ability to apply that attention to detail. So big companies like Apple can really dive in. They have systems and tools and teams for both observability and for forecasting down to the fraction of a penny that goes into your MacBook. And it's kind of wild to conceptualize that level of detail. And they're really staffing a human on each of these things. Obviously, that's not really possible for some of these lean teams and these early stage startups. And so the question really becomes, how do you build and kind of close that gap to provide and democratize that level and attention to detail and that visibility for these startups to give them a fighting chance to even scale to the stage that Apple is at today?
I love that. We'll come back to Apple and Butter Payments here in a sec. I love, and you talk a lot about this, you've actually been posting a lot about this around this reactive finance. And man, I know I could relate with that on so many levels, especially when now have this knowledge of all these tools, right? And one of the things we've talked about off camera is that risk management and leakage, while it may not be the sexiest part of finance, there's so much going on there. There's so much opportunity. And so when you think about reactive finance being broken, what do you think? What's the root cause? Is it visibility? Is it knowledge? What is it? And what is SpendPilot solving for?
I think it's visibility first and foremost. You need to know the what's of your business before you can ask, why is that happening? And what do I do next? So visibility is really kind of that leading indicator that is breaking finance and really making it reactive. Obviously, your business runs in real time, right? And so your FinOps, which is kind of a new term that I think I've seen more and more on LinkedIn and amongst my colleagues, your FinOps should run in real time too. Innovation, customer behavior, product development, everything is really moving at this unprecedented speed. But for whatever reason, our finance and our FinOps are still tethered to this month end and this quarter close cadence, which creates a visibility gap that genuinely can make or break a company.
Yeah. No, you're so spot on. I see it on the cash flow side. I love going there first. But you're right. We're so married to our P&L, yet no one challenges, well, why do I get this 30 days later? Even
Right.
20 days later, 15 days later, that is far too long for you to get financial data that you need to make some pretty big decisions off of, right? Payroll, CapEx, OpEx, all of these things, leakage,
Right.
right? Or plugging it. And so let's actually circle back to Apple and butter. How did that shape everything leading into Spend Pilot and how you think about or your perspective around scaling finance systems?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think for me, I always refer back to Apple as a great learning ground. They have done some amazing things and they've really showed what operational clarity can look like. And so when I worked actually specifically on the new product pricing team, that granularity was unbelievable.
Mm.
They would cost down to the fraction of a penny for the screw that goes into your MacBook. And all of these people and these processes would run their own forecasts and it would roll up into a cost model. So when they would launch a new product, they would sit around and they would basically take this roll up and discuss what's the right price for my product to keep our margins safe, to make our customers happy, and to really fulfill and maximize the value that we're delivering to our user. Now, that level of clarity became a core lesson for me. I
Amazing.
think if you want to scale through this rapid innovation, visibility is your survival system. And
Mhm.
so as I went on to Novo and Better, these were tiny teams. I was the first 20 hires at both of these,
Wow.
the first on the revenue side twice. So I kept trying to recreate this level of clarity with as little maintenance, which is huge because you don't want to inherit a headache,
Yeah.
and as little integration overhead as possible. And what I found is basically doesn't exist for small startups without having the people or the pockets to do so. So my takeaway really became that great financial systems should give you the visibility quickly, proactively, and with almost no overhead. And I found this was a gap that I couldn't refuse or resist building for.
So cool. I'd imagine those listening, like what a cool opportunity to work for one of the best brands still. Apple, absolutely amazing where they've come from, that whole story with Steve. By the way, great book out there about them, or I think I listened on audio, but that whole company and then where it is today, and they continue. Look at their cash on hand. It's an amazing company, and they'll continue to do great work. That's so awesome that you were able to lift up the hood and, in a sense, reverse engineer, right? This is how it
Right.
should be done when you're launching a product or getting anything out there in the market. Have you reverse engineered all the way up to your pricing, how this all works? What are all the costs and inputs that go into that? And so you're doing something very similar at SpendPilot, but for other organizations, maybe not a product, but the actual organization itself, which that's a
Right.
tall ask for SpendPilot, but we all need it. Everyone listening is probably thinking the same thing. And you post a lot about this. Speaking of engineering, LLM ops, right, shouldn't live with just the developers and IT engineers as we think of that. Oh, that's just an IT thing. This is actually, and you argue, this is a finance thing because of those costs associated. Can you just explain that? I did a terrible job there, but can you explain that?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's LLM ops, but it's product ops as a whole. And
Yeah.
obviously, your costs are a function of how you build your product and how much it costs to service it. And
Mhm.
so many argue this is a very technical space. So the engineers should own this. They should tell you these are the trade offs between kind of our customer and the quality of our product and the cost of it. And finance oftentimes doesn't necessarily have the technical knowledge to push back and ask the right questions there. So when you've asked like why shouldn't LLM ops live just in engineering, it's really because you get two different failure models, right? Depending
Mhm.
on who owns it. The engineer who owns it, you get kind of experimentation without guardrails. Every developer will pick their favorite model or the prompts will balloon with more context can't hurt, right? I'm going to make this most robust product I can.
Right.
And nobody notices because the feature works fine. It's giving the right output, but your testing costs X as you scale, which is just obviously not scalable at all.
Yeah.
And by the time the finance sees the invoice, the architecture is already baked in and it's kind of cost of doing business.
Yeah.
On the flip side,
Or how the heck
finance
did we
owns it.
get here? It's like that's the
Right, exactly. And on the flip side, like finance, you get cost control without context. So
Mm,
everything gets pushed back to the cheapest model. And obviously they're trying to optimize for the most profit possible.
sure.
So token budgets get set by spreadsheets, not by what the actual task that you're asking your product to do. And how does that task evolve over time? So I think it really sits at the intersection because with enough engineering fluency to understand why these costs move and enough financial discipline to ask, should these costs be moving and by how
Right.
much, you can now transform this from not just a reporting line item. It's more of a function that forces both sides into the same room before the architecture is set. So you can really make those trade offs intentionally between quality and output and costs. And there's a middle ground in between both of those, right?
Yeah. And, a lot of the audience are franchisor owners, franchisee owners. We definitely love the finance executives on and those AI enthusiasts and many of them, all of them, all together in one. And I don't want to lose anyone on the technical side of things, right? So, can you walk us through, if you're a business owner or even a finance leader, what they need to know at a basic level technically? And then finally, I guess the second question I have for you is if you can explain this whole token flow or this model level cost behavior that SpendPilot is truly solving for. I don't think people realize when they're using a lot of these AI tools or LLMs, they potentially could be using it incorrectly or maybe not to its best potential based off the dollars that they're actually spending. They're overspending in a sense. Can you
Totally.
walk us through all of that? I know, sorry, that was like three different questions, but there's a lot of important.
Yeah, so let's break it down for the
Yeah.
first one to start, kind of the baseline need to understand in this technical space. I think finance leaders obviously don't need to know how to build the AI systems. That's for your engineers, that's for your technical side of the house. But they do
Mhm.
need to know how to read the meter and really kind of understand the inputs and outputs that impact the P&L. So I think for like a very basic mental model, AI almost feels like a law firm, right? You pay for the time spent reading, for your materials, and the
Love
time
that.
spent writing the response. Reading is cheaper. It's just kind of ingestion. You can think about your consumer inputting a prompt or a question to an LLM interface. They'll read that prompt, and that's typically the cheapest part of the kind of process. The next price stage is writing. This is almost your reasoning, your compute level, and that's expensive, roughly 4 to 8 times more expensive than your read tokens. And then finally, you have your output tokens, and that's your most expensive because that's the end output. And there's a bunch of different levers that we can talk about and break down in a second. But at the core of it, the cost input that you typically see, which is like cost per thousand tokens, is essentially a wrap up of your input, your compute, and then your output. And that's kind of the
Mhm.
base mental model that all finance leaders should understand so that they don't get almost distracted by this pretty wrap up, and
Right.
understanding the output of that will really help you get a layer deeper and make this a more of a strategic center rather than just assumed input.
So good. There is a lot there. And for those that are like, what are you all talking about? Please do your research and homework. This is a topic that you carve out, you know, part of your day or weekend to go through because this is the future. And I know many in the fitness and wellness space where I spend a lot of my time, even in construction, this is happening. This is going on. This is also not only today, but the future. You have, especially on the finance side, you have to understand this, the token flows, your model level cost behaviors, all and leakage. So it's important. One thing we haven't chatted about, actually, and I'd love to ask you now that you have me thinking about it, is not necessarily internal costs, but the actual energy consumption is like a big tension point. And actually, now that I think about it, as you're looking for this type of leakage, or not necessarily in a negligent way, misuse, but actually just overspending for parts of the model that you just really don't need, right? I actually see this combo of this more humanitarian impact thing that's going on, this topic of energy consumption, because it does require a lot of energy to boot this stuff up.
Right.
Have you thought about that? Is that part of the mission at SpendPilot to make that type of impact in our community, in the country, in the world? Sounds like there's something there.
So I think in terms of kind of our mission, we're more here to provide visibility for you to make the right trade offs. And so you think about connecting your AI usage, your consumption, and kind of even the ethics or morality of that on the back end, and tie that back to what you're trying to serve and what you're trying to
Mhm.
do for your customer. So I think the really big unlock comes from when you shift from saying we're consuming too much or AI is costing too much to what are we trying to drive and how do we connect, like what's our cost per resolved ticket, or our cost per analyzed document.
Oh, I
That's
see.
when you
Yeah, I
can
like
actually
that.
design systems that scale and ethically too, right? Because if there's kind of overuse or exhaust in that way, I think that you know that there's some gray area and there's some room to improve there. But without the right visibility, you won't be able to have those strategic discussions or even know that that's a discussion that you should be having.
Love it. So good. That is a lot to think about there. Really good stuff. Now, when you spend time with these organizations and you're walking through usage billing, and I feel like there's a lot of organizations that must be blindsided by, the invoices they get, or when they start to add additional seats or what have you, there's a far greater cost to it. Why should owners be looking at this? Aside from protecting your margins, is there anything else that you're finding are pain points that you discover with some of these organizations once they do have the visibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because it's a moving target, unfortunately, and I think
Mhm.
that's kind of a exhausting answer. There's new models that are in the works right now, and they're shipping constantly, and it creates this
Yeah.
moving target of one model is 16 cents per thousand tokens, another one is $1.50, and it's like, well, why? What should I use this for? And what is the right model that's going to give me the best output for the cheapest cost? And so it's this ever changing optimization equation. And so I think that really understanding that every new model brings new capabilities and new costs. And big companies, like I said, have whole teams watching this, whereas small operators don't. And so I think that's where the power of AI tooling comes in and really unlocks this next generation for businesses to be able to attack this problem at scale and really optimize for the cost and the new capabilities and have the right visibility to have those discussions.
Well, now you're making me think of it. And I think you've posted about it, this model drift, right? I mean, I feel like every week there's something new coming out, whether it's ChatGPT, OpenAI, or Copilot, Microsoft, or Grok. Like there's something always new. I know they're all racing,
Right.
but then now rather than, hey, I'm excited, let's go use, let's go prompt, let's go after it. I want to say, hold your brakes, hold on. Let's read the fine print. Let's think about what it's
Right.
costing from a token perspective. That is so interesting. And do you see that? Like a lot of what it sounds like SpendPilot is also doing, not only solving these things, but there's a layer of education. I'd imagine some of your, initial conversations for finance leaders, for everyone in the
Right.
C-suite, any leader, it's going over their head. Maybe not the CTO or CIO, but maybe even there too. I don't know. How have those conversations been, and what's that education layer that Spend Pilot
You know,
provides?
that's a great question. It's actually something very similar to what I saw when I was at Butter Payments. Butter was first to the market in payment recovery. They came to market and they're like, hey, you need to squeeze every last dollar that you process and make sure that you're retaining the customers that you need to retain. But they were doing that in a growth market. So everyone's like,
Mm.
forget that. I'm going to be able to go and get my next customer tomorrow. So it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter if I retain them. We're going to replenish them faster than we need to retain them. So it's fine. As the market shifted more towards this unit economics, this like optimize at all costs, because the
Mhm.
market is contracting, payment recovery became this like fad. And so I think in the beginning, what we saw is our primary job is not to sell you, it's to educate you and open your eyes to the opportunity and the problem space that you have in your business, and then educate you on how we can help you fix that. And if it's not the right fit, it's not the right fit. I always tell my co founder, I'm like, I'm not a hard salesman. If it doesn't make sense for your business, you shouldn't be partnered with us. But every business with usage based pricing, especially in the AI space, has a need for this because it's only going to be a growing blind spot as we scale AI and AI ops into our products.
No, you're right. I mean, and for those listening, they've either have adopted and now they're going back and like, we need some type of a audit trail or assessment, which we'll get to here in a sec. Or those that were thinking about adopting, it's like, hold on, y'all, we need to add something to the committee. We're talking about this topic tomorrow. So this is really
Right.
good. I'm curious, out of all the data, and I know you're helping tons and tons of organizations now, but as you've gathered data, is there a rough estimate or figure that you found on average you're saving organizations to the bottom line?
Yeah, organizations are typically overspending by about 30 to 60%, which can be as big as 20, 30 grand a month, and it can be as small as a grand, just depends on the scale. But by
Right.
and large, we've seen within 30 to 60% overspend on average from just pure lack of visibility. And it's not that
Mhm.
people don't want to optimize, it's just that there's this misnomer that this is the cost of doing business. So I'm just going to take the default model or the most expensive model because that's going to drive the best results, but that's actually driving massive overspend
Yeah.
and really hurting your margins there.
I'm curious, are you like Are you getting any like bad mail or bad DMs from like a Microsoft Copilot, or is that to come? They're like, who is this? We've been cashing in, just raking it in. None of these executives know that they're overspending K a month. Have you gotten any of that yet?
Yeah.
Or
We've gotten a little bit of backlash there. And I think it's funny because I don't want to assume bad intent, but part of
right,
this feels overly confusing for no reason, right? And it's like
totally,
you could break it down by input tokens, output tokens, reasoning depth. They can make those recommendations, but they don't because everyone wants to cost maximize, right? Everyone wants their biggest
sure.
margins, and maybe it's just not top priority for them. So we do get a little bit of backlash from
I'm
the
sure.
actual providers themselves, especially because they claim that, we have tooling and dashboards that we do ourselves, but they're very basic. So I'll give you an example. AWS on the cloud infrastructure side actually has the ability to cap spend or usage based spend
Wow.
by day or by week. So you can say, hey, my monthly, I want to only go up to $5,000. Okay, great. But that's a misnomer for control because if you hit virality and you overnight go from 1,000 users to 10,000 users,
Good point.
that's a great problem to have, but you're probably going to spike your AWS costs to more than 5,000. And so now suddenly you're having to make this trade off between growth and enabling that growth and scale and cost control, which shouldn't be the case, right?
Yeah, that's a big tension point, right? It's like
Hmm.
there's a risk of stalling out and impacting growth. It's like, wait a second, that's not what we wanted. Although you're trying to do it at the benefit of protecting cost overrun. That's so interesting. And I'm curious, yeah, because now you make me think like I now want almost like a real-time calculator, right? It's like it's almost like a fuel gauge. It's like, where am I at? Am I
Yep.
full, on empty? Am I filled up? That and does SpendPilot do any of that? And I'd love to chat about just the complementary assessments that you're all doing as well. It sounds like
Right.
and I know I'm calling it wrong. Can you walk us through that as well?
Yeah, so I think what we like to call it is context enriched tools. And so it's about bringing in as much context into one place as simple as possible. And so we
Mhm.
do revenue enriched reporting. So we integrate into Plaid, we integrate into QuickBooks, we can integrate into Stripe. Plaid is our kind of number one integration there. You don't have QuickBooks, no worries, that's fine. It just adds more context for us to be able to provide you better reporting. And then on the expense side, we can also bring in the Plaid transactions. So suddenly you're getting both the revenue side of the house and the expense side of the house, and your
Wow,
insights are now enriched by both parties, which is
excellent.
super important because obviously you're not making decisions based on one or the other, you're making decisions on both. And
Sure.
there are tools that do one or the other really well, but not both. And definitely not in real time. So I think that's our North Star goal.
Differentiator. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And so I think as we build out our integration suite, it's not a matter of which endpoint we're building for, it's about when we're building for it. So Stripe and Plaid are currently coming soon in Q1, which is great. We currently have QuickBooks and then our AI endpoints as well, which is great. On the audit side of things, we do a free, we call it an AI spend audit to help give you a lay of the land and again, opportunity size, what addressing this area looks like for you. And so we essentially take an admin read only key for you, which is completely secure. We don't store your data and we produce a lay of the land for you. How much are you spending a month? How does this break down input, output, reasoning? What is your average cost per token across those? You can break it down
Wow.
by endpoint and by product. And so you can really start to get this strategic insight of saying, what is the power of having this visibility on an ongoing basis to my business? And we've seen some really great opportunity zones for people to say, wow, tomorrow I could be having these conversations and have a seat at the table with informed real time data, which is super powerful.
This is why I wanted you on the show. This is so good. Everyone needs to hear this. First of all, everyone needs to go do that AI audit piece. Please do. And we'll put it in the show notes. A lot of the organizations that I talk to are thinking about AI as far as like where is the low-hanging fruit, right? Where can we go and get some good ROI, generate revenue or improve productivity and things like that. Where haven't heard the conversation until I met you, haven't heard the conversation going is how do we also protect leakage? How do we protect from
Hmm.
anomalies and cost spikes as we're looking to introduce more AI, use it more? That is not in the conversation, but again, there's so much opportunity there. So this is so good. Speaking of spikes and anomalies and leakage, right? How does that work with SpendPilot? How do you detect it? Like, for instance, using as you're going through credit card statements or credit card bills, like
right?
we're all putting everything, all our LLMs, multiple, they're on there. How are you detecting all of this?
Yeah, so I've talked a bit about the AI usage spend side of things. We integrate directly into that endpoint so we get your real time data and your real time usage as
Got
it
it.
happens. But taking a step back more generally, we actually collect into where the data originates as well with Plaid. So as soon as that hits your card and your accounting tools, the source data essentially monitors those transactions and is able to then produce the notifications, produce the data that helps. The reason this is important is because if you flip the script on your traditional source of truth, it is your ERP. And
Mhm.
without someone who's constantly updating, uploading invoices, doing that kind of continuous close process, which is a
Yeah.
whole job in itself,
Right.
your data is as up to date as you put it in. And so we really want to reverse that and say, when do you incur those charges and when does it matter the most? And can we integrate there so we can bring you your real time visibility that every company needs as they're making these strategic decisions daily, weekly, monthly?
Wow, that is so good. I mentioned it earlier. I spent a lot of time on the cash flow side, line item by line item, inflows and outflows. And we too at Valicides plug into the ERP or QBO. But what that does, and there's still human in the loop, right? We're scrubbing it in. And I
Right.
love that you brought that up, which we'll get to here in a sec. But God, how amazing would it also be? Here's your cash positioning. And by the way, it's better because SpendPilot was introduced, plugged in, and we caught this is what they caught. You would have spent X, your cash positioning would have been at Y had
Right.
we not plugged you all in, plugged SpendPilot in. That's pretty cool. You got me. I'm stimulated right now. I'm thinking about so many different things. So good. Well, let's go to the human side, right? Because you've posted about it. SpendPilot is this ambient finance, which I'd love to hear. What did you mean by that? And then also you mentioned human to human endpoints, right? There's still human in the loop, which I think is very comforting because there's a lot of tools out there that say we're only AI. And that worries me because I don't think AI is there yet to just say, hey, you're free to reign and do as you please, especially when it comes to money, right? It's very
Right.
sensitive, trust me. And you know this, right? So can you walk us through ambient finance and then also that human in the loop that you all promote and do at SpendPilot?
Yeah, totally. So ambient finance is essentially the concept that we coined that's always on in the background. It's essentially a security camera for your money. And when we were start with our positioning at first, we were really struggling to put words to like, what is this always on financial radar in like a very nicely branded, buttoned up term? And we found because we are one of the first tools on the market that is really bridging this real time reporting that there was no term for it. So SpendPilot coined this term ambient finance to really serve for that always on security camera for your cash flow. And it's not about creating more noise. It's about notifying you of what you need to know when you need to know it. Because everyone's been suffering from those emails or Slack notification galore, and it's almost more noise than it's worth. And so it's about really finding that balance between flagging what you need to see when you need to see it and nothing more and nothing less. So
I
that's kind of
secretly
where
I secretly call it the cover your ass, the CYA finance. That's a that's what I say. That's why we need SpendPilot to cover my ass because I'm gonna go propose this and use AI, and now all these CEOs are gonna be asking how much are we wasting in costs, right? It's the cover your ass
right.
SpendPilot. Thank you, SpendPilot.
Totally. But I do think you hit on an important point where it's not about replacing the human in the loop. It's about enabling and speeding up the ability for the human to provide judgment. So
Right.
when I kind of differentiate between automation and AI enablement and humans, I really
Mhm.
look at automation for unexpected charges, for flags on duplicates, for subscription creep, for spend anomalies, for patterns across different locations that are really hard to track with the visible eye. And then for automating and enabling automation on manual tasks. So you think like transaction categorization or uh, kind of invoice uploads and making sure that things are getting out and paid on the right schedule and cadence. All of those very manual tasks are great candidates for AI, but where humans really need to step in, they need to decide what to cancel, when to renegotiate, what
Mhm.
actually drives value, how spend aligns with those goals. And so I think the goal is never to remove humans completely. It's to enable them to be strategic faster. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where I see the delineation between those
Yeah,
two
it's almost
worlds.
intense targeting, right? It takes you there a lot
Right.
quicker. Yeah, I love that. And so, we talked a lot about SpendPilot. I know, as we mentioned on top, you worked with Butter Payments, and many of those listening probably recognize the name, probably work with them, or have had chats with them because they're heavily involved in the wellness and fitness space. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, just from your experience and having dug in specific to fitness and wellness operators, we all know many already run fairly thin margins as it is, right? If you think about the
Yep.
occupancy cost, payroll being one of the highest, and as you get down to the bottom line, there's some that are running a fairly thin 5 cents, 6 cents, 15 cents on the dollar. I always promote don't expand unless you're 30 cents plus, right? But what are some of
Totally.
the financial blind spots that you've seen as you've lifted up the hood to some of these fitness and wellness studios or franchise systems?
Yeah, I think it's death by a thousand cuts, really.
Mm,
Thin margins means small leaks. So whether that's software creep,
I love that.
duplicate tools, AI
Yeah,
add-ons, unmonitored spend. Really, it's almost so you don't know what you don't know. And so I
right.
really don't fault a lot of these franchisee owners who are managing sometimes thousands of different gyms or different product lines, different customer segments. It's impossible to be the eyes everywhere all the time. And so it's this death by a thousand cuts where a little leaks here and a little leaks here
Mm,
just erodes your margins over time. And it's just impossible to scale without the right infrastructure or safety net or cover your ass
yeah.
tool to help you cover those.
No, that is so good. It's a good reminder that you just have to be aware. A lot of this is knowledge, education, visibility, awareness, right? And
Right.
I love just chatting with people like you because it's a reminder for me too, as someone that's on the finance side. It's just you got to look at all angles. Your head's on a swivel when it comes to business. Because you're right. Sometimes just the business kind of takes on a life of its own, and you lose sight of some of these costs that are just stacking up. That you're just, we just move on with business as usual, and you're wondering why your cash or margins are thinning too thin, right? And so that's exciting. And I know a lot of people listening. I mean, you're the AI expert, right? The subject matter expert. As you think about fitness and wellness, and you're right, this huge push to unit economics, unit economics, unit economics. There's a lot of private equity coming into this space right now. And I posted about it recently. If you don't get your unit economics in check, you're going to get that call or knock on the door. Either they're going to compete with you or they're going to get you and buy you at a discount. It's like, which one do
Yep.
you want? Now, strengthening your unit economics. But in the age of AI and AI tools, what are your thoughts about that? Like, how do you strengthen unit economics in this new tech revolution?
Yeah, so I think regardless of whether or not these franchises have a digital experience or an app based or an AI enabled experience, one concept holds true. AI at its core is great if it increases revenue or reduces labor. And so I think
Mhm.
the revenue piece is more tied into your app based experience if you do have a digital experience. But you can also look at deploying AI across your labor force to optimize for efficiency. If it is not increasing one of those two things, it's harmful and it
Yeah.
adds cost. And so I think there's this buzz around, well, we should just be deploying AI everywhere, but every tool needs to earn its keep, right? And it should be in the same way that you would evaluate if a staff member or an additional headcount is really earning its keep or mandating the value that you're paying it. And so I think tying it back to how are you measuring value? What are you hoping to get out of it? And if it's not increasing revenue or reducing labor, probably don't use it.
Yeah, it's so good. And by the way, now you got me thinking about this too. In addition to your AI audit, is there anything else that SpendPilot puts out there? I can't imagine. I'm so jealous. The data that you have at your fingertips and the trends that you see, regardless of industry, when it comes to this topic and leakage. Is there anything else
Yep.
that you all put out there, whether it be, I don't know, some type of a case study, articles, newsletter, or anything that we can follow?
So we do post a ton of thought leadership in the space based on internal data that we get from our clients. We have yet to post our first case study, but that's definitely in the works in the first half of the year. But
Yeah.
we do post a ton on thought leadership in the space, what to be watching for. I just actually posted today around solo founders on the rise. And I think that that is really marquee and a huge milestone for us. We've been rising in the percentage of solo founders for the last 8 years or something like that. And that is a testament to the tech enablement that we are able to
Oh,
see with AI. This wouldn't be possible 10 years ago because we didn't have the technology that could offset the value of having another person right beside you. We are reaching that scary inflection point where
oh,
sometimes it's more valuable to have the right tools than the right person. And I think it's a balance between that. But definitely our page at SpendPilot on LinkedIn or
mm.
Brian Casty's my co-founder of my LinkedIn. We can post it in the show notes. But we post a ton on this space, just industry trends, data we're seeing, and trends we're seeing.
So I just did this demo. We're finalizing, and I'll just say it today. We're be launching a 24/7 CFO agent. What's great about it is in the knowledge base, it's scraping your accounting data, right?
That's
Your
amazing.
GL, your COA, all of that stuff. And so at any point, especially for the owners that don't have a finance leader or can't get
Totally.
access to me, I'm on the beach just sipping a Mai Tai, and I'm just gonna maybe it's late at night or something, it's probably more so early morning. I'm a night owl. I'm up all night. But God, I want a spend pilot assistant like at all times, like just
Yep.
to nudge me, to flag me, to ding me, like, hey, no, you're gonna this is gonna be a bad decision. Like you were saying
Yep.
earlier, proactive finance, not shoot. I can't believe we did that a month ago. Now we're learning from it.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
proactive
know,
finance is far better.
it's funny you bring that up because even the vacation piece, we were talking to one of our customers last week and he had gone on vacation. And before SpendPilot, he was using email notifications. So he essentially would scrape the data every day and calculate the cost per token and then like the monthly usage spent, or
Oh,
sorry,
wow.
the spend month to date. And so he would basically track it month on month and just do it every day manually. He went on vacation for a week. He came back and opened up to a bill of 7 grand. And he was
Oh,
like, I usually only spend $500 a month. This is crazy. And he was like, what's going on? But he just took a vacation, which everyone should be able to take a vacation.
sure.
Wasn't monitoring that every day, came back to 7 grand. And the kicker, it was one customer and they were on the freemium. They weren't even paying. And so he hit 7 grand in expenses to service this customer who wasn't even paying
Oh my
because
good.
of an error in the line item that didn't filter out a functionality in his code base, which everyone's human. You're going to have those. But if you can catch that at $700 versus 500 and not 7 grand, I would take that bet any day, especially for a tool that is ROI positive every time.
Well, I talk a lot about customer acquisition costs, so that one's going through the roof.
Yeah.
But you guys solve for it, right? You're fixing it now, so that's really good. A lot of people, and I had actually Ryan Seaford, he's over at Tetrick Technology, local here in Houston, come on recently. But we talked a lot about just the lack of optimization when it comes to use of software, right? And
Mhm.
typically there's just a ton of miscalculation, poor planning when it comes to owners making software spend decisions. Have you seen that too at SpendPilot? And how do you educate and help? How do you support there?
Yeah, we see that all the time. I think starting with the most basic of just duplicate vendors, you could have Asana and Jira, and it's like, well, why are we paying for both of those things if they both
Right.
do project management? But I think the biggest thing that people miscalculate is they assume this cost is fixed. Oh, I sign up for a service, we're using it, so we never need to review it again. But in reality, software really behaves like variable costs, right?
Got it.
Usage, seats, add-ons, metered AI charges, they all add up, especially as new features are shipped and deployed with historical software vendors like Figma, for example. They just shipped their first AI and they charge usage base. And that's great, but historically you're used to paying a per seat pricing there. So if you're not watching that and watching that bill and you're using the new functionality, you're gonna get hit with this surprise bill at the end of the month. So if you wait 30 days to check in, especially as your franchise is growing fast, you're already behind. And I actually saw this funny example was in my old role, we had a Figma subscription and it was managed by our third party accounting. And they don't know. They know we're growing fast. They know we're hiring. And
Sure.
so we saw that go up from $250 a month to 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 because every single time that a new employee would come, they would just provision them a seat. Oh,
Yeah.
does our engineer need to be in our design copies? No, they need to be a view only. So if we are producing something technical, they can review and leave feedback, but they don't need a paid seat for Figma. And so we ended up paying, I think, close to 5 grand in unused seats just because no one was watching it. And we were like, things are great. Business is booming. We're growing super fast. So we don't
Mhm.
need to pay attention to this. But why do you have to pick between optimization and scale and growth? It's not a feast or famine. You can kind of have the middle ground.
Okay, so speaking of that, and you make me think. So we talked about your differentiators, which is amazing, but the other one is actually also for the small business in a space, right, with these AI tools available. But if you have that spend pilot assistant, right, that proactive finance layer, the ambient layer, you could actually now start to compete with some of these bigger businesses, right? And that's the whole idea. This is to democratize this entire business layer when using AI. I'm sure that's a lot of what you all talk about. Can you walk us through that and this just how in this new AI economy, small businesses actually have almost a leg up with all of this or should?
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny. I think they actually have a leg up because of how they're structurally built. They're built for innovation. They're built to be nimble. They're built to move
Right.
fast. And that's what the market is doing with AI. New things are shipping every day. There's new capabilities that are unlocked every day, every month, every quarter. And so when you look at how these big legacy players in the market are built, they're built for process, they're built for QA, they're incredibly rigid. And it's very hard to ship something new without going through all of the bureaucratic steps and saying, oh, we've QA'd this, we've processed this, now we're going to ship it a month later. The landscape's changed. And so actually, I would argue that these small businesses that are new entrants are more well suited and more innovative to ship new features over time because they're structurally set up to absorb that innovation, whereas big
Yeah.
companies and incumbents are not.
It's interesting to think about. Something that I was also thinking about too is I think about, and I just like to do this, like which department in the org is just overspending. I don't know why. I love that this department, especially being a finance guy. I love them. Sometimes I don't, but I love them because you can start measuring more things nowadays. Marketing. I can only imagine because I think of Google VO and some of these other things, image generation, right? And all of these now AI driven ads. I can't imagine the tokens used to make some of these things. But maybe I'm off. Like where do you feel like, let's just go 2026 if you can predict it. Like where's compression of margin overspend happening the most? Do you have that data yet on a department by department basis or maybe an industry by industry, or it's not there yet?
I think it's more based on how they are monetizing. So
Okay.
from a general market perspective, anywhere there's a ton of saturation, there's going to be compression. And that's whether you're a growth economy or you're
Right.
in a contracted economy. But I think where we start to see a lot of compression have a high opportunity cost is with subscription based companies that either have fixed pricing or freemium because the opportunity cost of an oopsie at the end of the month is higher, especially if you're already in the red with some of these loss leader
Mhm.
customer segments. And so when you start to have high saturation, you lose pricing power. And then as your variable cogs either scale up or down, or they're kind of this moving target, you lose the ability to then pass that cost onto the customer. And so your
Mhm.
opportunity cost is essentially just how does your bottom line impact? And if you're not optimizing, then you're kind of dead in the water there. You're losing your pricing power and you don't have the right visibility to know the levers to pull to even improve that. So you kind of just take what you can get. And that's a really scary place to be in this market right
Yeah.
now.
Well, I know we've chatted about this offline or off camera too. You know where I'm at on just this trying to kind of navigate through this idea of this usage based everything, like how we purchase and
Mhm.
behave. And not necessarily from a company's perspective. Yes, you're right. Like usage based pricing model, usage based costs. But I think about us, the consumer. Say I want to go use X gym, X studio,
Mhm.
and what happens if it's this economy or in this industry, wellness and fitness, that's so used to the monthly EFT dues, and it
Yep.
turns into this, well, people only pay when they use. You only spend when you use or how you use. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I don't know if it's going in that direction, if that's even like, does that benefit the consumer when we think about habits and power users and actually getting results? That's the whole point of fitness and wellness. But
Right.
sometimes, although they say in economics we're rational, behavioral economics says we're not, right? So we're not rational. So maybe we would actually put the I only want to spend when I use ahead of my monthly payment's going to make me come more often. I don't know. Have you thought about that at all?
I think it becomes for the company. Well, actually, I'll split this into two thought camps. One, like how you pick your pricing structure should marry to what your end goal of your product is. And if you think about usage based pricing, you're almost penalizing the customer for engaging with your product or service because you're going to pay more for it. For super users, they're like, well, is this just going to grow without bound? Which is actually great. We want super users. We want people that are maniacally obsessed with your service, your product, and
Right.
experience, but you don't want them to think twice about using it. And so I would say on the company side of thing, really understanding like what is the intention of the action that we're trying to incentivize? And would
Mhm.
we prefer to have those super users, those high end users? And is our monetization structure actually set up to reward what we want, the end user, the end type of customer that we want? From a consumer side of things, we've seen that consumers prefer predictability. So even if they're paying $100 a month for a gym service that they don't use or an app that they don't use, they know that they're paying that $100 a month every month. And so it's more of like a predictability thing as they're setting their budgets. Usage based pricing is this big question mark. And I think it drives more fear and second guessing than it does model
Interesting.
or like adoption to the product or service.
Now, let me throw in because he's been on the show, Alan Thompson over at Grow Solutions. they're finding a way to then layer in almost this gamification, right? And
Oh,
incentivizing to, what does he call it? To influence behavior. Behavioral modification is what he calls it. I don't know. You throw that in and maybe it's a different ball game, right? So, so
totally.
interesting. This is so good. I have one more question for you and I want to be respectful of your time. What's the for the audience out there and you know who they are and what industry and all of that. What's that one message you want to leave every business owner listening to this to remember?
Yeah, I think AI or not, I think if you fail to plan, you've planned to fail, right? And
Mhm.
there's that age old saying. And I
It's a
think
big
it's
one.
never too early to build for scale. So spend products, whether that's usage based or software based or cogs based, they don't grow linearly, they compound. And so these small leaks become these margin killers really quickly. The we'll fix it later doesn't really work anymore. And so I always say later is always here, especially amongst the AI companies where the landscape is changing so quickly. So, in my opinion, the businesses that will win in the next year and the next 5 years build that scale muscle early with the real time visibility, with the tight judgment calls, and the systems that grow with them instead of against them. I don't think you any longer have to choose between growth and scale. You can kind of do both and with AI.
I'm a listener right now. Once this releases, obviously, I'm taking this podcast episode. I'm doing another round of budgeting for 26 and all my goal making and vision boarding. I'm listening to this podcast before I go do it all. This was so good, Kat. I really appreciate it. I know you mentioned it, but let's repeat it. How, if people want to connect with you and learn more about Spend Pilot, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's great for me. It's Catherine Neuman. I just got married, so I changed my last name.
Congrats.
And then email as well, cat at spendpilot.io. You'll find we have a LinkedIn page as well. Just search SpendPilot. Any of those avenues, we are super responsive, my co-founder Ryan and I, and would love to chat, whether that's just about friction points or problems that you're seeing. And like I said, I don't really hard sell. I more just like to learn from those pain points. And if there's a good fit, there's a good fit. But please reach out and let's have a chat.
Man, I could attest to that for everyone listening. You truly are a servant leader and you love to support and help and think big picture and educate. So for sure. I wanted to double down on that. That is so true. And hey, here, I'll do the pitching because I really think Stratego, Spend Pilot, Valisites, like that is a badass tech stack. I'm not biased. No, seriously, that would be awesome. But as I always say, if you're an owner, franchisor, or operator looking for a fractional CFO that can build a finance engine that scales with you, shoot, throw in Spend Pilot as well. We're going to do it. Connect with me at strategointel.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. In addition, more importantly, all of the Spend Pilot information. Again, new episodes are dropping of the Owner Seat. I'm so glad that we've rebranded. It's every Monday and Friday. So you'll see Kat here soon, 8 a.m. Central. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. Kat, this has been such a pleasure. I'm glad we did this. And I think we need to continue. We're going to have you back on because got to keep chatting. I could chat for hours on this. This is so good.
Yeah,
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
All
Yeah,
right,
happy
everybody. Thank
holidays.
you.
Thanks for having me.
My
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you.